There are very few political trials in apartheid South Africa that did not necessarily feature the name of George Bizos, and among them was the Delmas Treason Trial in the mid-1980s. It was considered the longest trial in the country's history, whose intention was to suppress the United Democratic Movement. And among the 22 defendants were the big three, as Moses Chikane, Popo, Molefe and Mosiuoa Lekota were known. We now have on the line Mosiuoa Lekota, leader of COPE. Mr. Lekota, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us and a warm welcome to the agenda.
Good morning indeed. The name of the organization we were representing was the United Democratic Front.
Okay, I do beg your pardon. Thanks for clarifying that. First of all, your initial reaction to the passing of Mr. Bizos?
And it was a terrible loss. Actually, I tell you, one of the greatest South Africans indeed. And I must say, I say that because according to him, he arrived in South Africa at the age of 17, a refugee from the Mediterranean region of Greece, and with his father. So he arrived here in the middle of struggle from where he came from, and was immediately immersed in the issues of struggle, assisting there, and then of course immediately became part of the struggle of the people of South Africa. That's where his passion came from. And it was unbelievable how he identified with the struggle of the people of South Africa. And every day his life was about struggle. I think it's a serious loss for all of us South Africans.
Okay, Mr. Lekota, just how important was George Bizos in the eventual overturning of the Delmas trial?
He was, his role, there were two of them who were our defense lawyers. The leader of the team was Chikane, who was the legal, who debated the legal point. But witness after witness, the cross-examination, the daily hard work was done by George. He was extremely important. Every witness, he is the one who cross-examined and all of that. And then Chikane would now argue the matter ultimately. And I think that it was really his performance. It was his work that turned around. Both of them were like twins, because when the Rivonia trial was going on, Chikane used to study the team leader and did that work. And according to them, George was the cross-examiner. They were a solid team. And that's how really our lives were saved. There was 22 of us. In the end, all of us were saved, where we were charged with high treason, which carried death, terrorism, which carried death, and the 6 counts of murder, because in the rioting that had taken place, some 6 people had died. The councillor, 5 councillors, and 1 bodyguard. Everybody was quite convinced that some of us were going to be harmed. But can you believe it? When the case was finished, we were all released. It was a miracle for us. Mm. So I must say that the two, George and the late Chikane, they really turned it around, and they placed us on a course in which we were to be able to see the day of freedom.
You know, Mr. Lekota, so many people who have met George Bizos have their own special story to tell about what a father figure he was, about what a warm personality he was, and about what a caring person he was. Do remind us, if you can, of your very first meeting with George Bizos, how that meeting was and what was going on.
No, I can't remember the very first meeting, but what I can remember is that later on, as we were now familiar with, we began to feel that he was one of us. It was like he was one of the accused. And you know, he was very homely. And when some of us got bail, he'd also invite them to his house sometimes. And sometimes he'd come to the court and bring us some Greek dishes, which were cooked by his family or cooked by him when he was with his family. It's from him I learned about the famous Greek dish called soufla. And he brought us that meat. It's delicious. I never forget all of this. And yes, indeed, as I say, he was like one of us. We used to call him the elephant because he was so strong. And he strengthened us. And I think there was a very, very serious hatred that the leaders or the members of the apartheid regime had for him. They had this sense that he was just one of the communists and he was just there to advance the cause of the communists. I think they really didn't like him.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, in the early 1990s, he joined other lawyers in court proceedings to approve South Africa's post-democratic constitution, which is regarded as one of the most liberal in the world. And in post-democratic South Africa, Mr. Lekota, you are the one of the most vocal leaders who lamented the violation of some of the dictates of the country's constitution by some leaders. So what, in your belief, is George Bizos' biggest contribution to South Africa? And, you know, how do you think he felt about the state of South Africa that he was in?
Look, I think he continued to feel very strongly that the values enshrined in our Constitution are inviolable. I think he really was committed to our Constitution. I feel just as strong. I feel very strong about our Constitution as it is. Some people say that this Constitution is a sellout Constitution and what, but I think they don't know what they're talking about. But George was very firmly committed to this Constitution. His whole life had been about contributing to a South Africa that would make it a home for all of us. And I don't doubt at all that he would not agree with changing any part of this Constitution.
Now, how would you like South Africa to remember him?
I think South Africa must remember George as one of the pillars of our Constitution. He was part of the people that came out of the Congress of the People population. He was one of those who, step by step, went along with the leaders, both the ones who went to jail and the ones that went to exile. He was there when they came out of jail and came back from exile. He was there when the Constitution was being drafted, and he was there when it was adopted. He didn't go to Parliament. He continued to work as a lawyer to assist those who were dealing with the nitty-gritties of every day, creating the South Africa that he and others had dreamt of, that they had taught us to fight for. And therefore, I think we must remember him as one of the greatest fighters for the new South Africa, one which I still believe will still arise. I don't see South Africa changing this Constitution. I can only see us completing its implementation.
Okay. Now, just before I let you go, Mr. Lekota, and I would like to quote you an excerpt from his memoir. He said that in South Africa, there was at least lip service paid to the legal principles, and the courtroom often was the last forum available to condemn oppressive policies and the deprivation of fundamental rights. So what do you make of that particular comment in his memoir? And do you think that the courtroom in South Africa is the panacea to give justice to the people of South Africa?
Look, the panacea to give justice to the people of South Africa can only be the implementation. I think that quotation is really about what we should be doing. It's a task of what we should complete.
Okay. All right. Mr. Lekota, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
My privilege, my brother.
That was Mosiuoa Lekota, the leader of COPE, just sharing his recollection and memories of George Bizos.